What is gentrification? Most people understand it to be the cause of too many overpriced coffee shops and tapas bars, the replacement of affordable restaurants, stores, and housing with unaffordable ones, and the sudden influx of higher incomes and, along with them, higher prices and taxes. The definition, as listed in Oxford Language, is the process whereby the character of a poor urban area is changed by wealthier people moving in, improving housing, and attracting new businesses, typically displacing current inhabitants in the process. The definition is frequently squabbled over, but understood to be a bad thing for pushing out the lower class and frequently minority groups. However, little is discussed of semantic gentrification.
What is a woman?
That's a stupid question, dude. That's a dumb question.
What is a woman? It's not a trick question. What is a woman?
Who identifies as a woman?
You can't answer the question with the question. Yeah, define the woman without saying woman. You're in college, paying for an education. What is a woman?
How about you talk to someone with media training? How about you talk to someone
You don't need media training. It's not a trick. What is a woman? You can't answer the question with the... It's the college kids of America going hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt who think it's a trick question when you ask them what a woman is.
Dave Hewitt coined the term in his 2024 article. He writes, "There is a phenomenon I've noticed in political discourse many times in recent years which goes like this. An existing term is colonized and its meaning subverted to new political ends. Previous users of the term are forced to come up with a new term to replace the old one. The new occupants demonize the old and deny political legitimacy to any new terminology. The best description I can think of for this process is semantic gentrification, in which users of a word's original meaning are forced out by newcomers who consider themselves morally enlightened in comparison to the older population, who completely change the character of a term in service of their own narrow interests, and who regard the now homeless former inhabitants with contempt. Inherent in this is a sense in which the new meaning is superior to the old, representing a progressive moral inevitability, in that attempts to assert old meanings are denied legitimacy as regressive, backwards, and on the wrong side of history. Why would you want to hold on to a run-down, backwards, old semantic neighborhood when this shiny new hipster takeover is such a clear improvement? More than just a straightforward language shift where a term changes or becomes emptied of meaning over time, this is much more of an explicit takeover. A subversion and description of language as a clear exercise of the power of the colonizers, appropriating whatever goodwill exists towards the original semantic structures, while those who are usurped are both ostracized and unable to clearly articulate their position. And since this process is invariably in service of men's needs and interests, that really puts the gent in gentrification. Sound familiar?
You know, I'm starting to think cis women and trans misogyny exempt trans men who partake in fandom spaces don't really know what TERF means. Because a trans woman could make the slightest, tiniest critique of misogyny in fandom spaces, especially in terms of how disproportionately more slash-fic there is for works than there are fem-slash, even when the actual work itself primarily consists of female characters. And these cis women and trans misogyny exempt trans men will start screeching about how evil and misogynistic the trans woman is for pointing out misogyny in fandom spaces, to the point where reading some of the tweets this entire discourse has spawned, it makes it sound like they're trying really hard to not outright veer into misgendering. Like, you can tell they have to physically resist from, calling this trans woman a male, or going off about male socialization or whatever. And it's like, no, that's not what a TERF is. A TERF is not a trans woman who calls out misogyny. A trans woman who calls out misogyny is the victim of a TERF, not the perpetuator. And often, during these trans-misogynistic screeches, they will often reveal some fetishization of gay men, too. or at least a disturbing lack of empathy for actual gay men. But, when I compare that to their rampant trans misogyny, I feel like the trans misogyny is the bigger problem. Because at least the queer men they're fetishizing and sexualizing are fictional. The trans women they're harassing for being against that are real people.
Over the years, feminism has lost its rigid definition. Where it was once counterculture and where feminism was recognized as a threat to the status quo, today capitalism has gotten a hold and blunted its teeth. This was done not by brute force. No, a straightforward attack always provokes a response, such as how so many people turned out to protest the overturning of Roe v. Wade. However, those same women are seeking elective surgeries, spending more of their paychecks despite earning less, and more of their time, despite having less free time on average, on beauty procedures. This is the generation which presents Gail Dines as a SWERF, or sex work exclusionary radical feminist, for researching, writing, and talking about the harms of porn and prostitution. These are the ones who post on OnlyFans, who advocate for the normalization of abuse during sex, and who have openly defended all forms of sexual degradation under the guise of free expression, even to their own detriment. These women, at best, hold some feminist values, but often complain about or blame feminism for various woes. They may appreciate the ability to own a bank account and own a car, but blame feminism for having to balance work and home life.
Thanks a lot, you idiot. Thanks a lot, Rachel. Thanks a lot.
They strive against unwanted sexualization, but choose to sexualize themselves and brand it feminist because they chose it.
Seems like some of you closeted Facebook moms aren't in on the bimbo movement. So let's take a trip down memory lane. Who is the Gen Z bimbo? What is a bimbo? These are the questions that millennials and weird Facebook moms with too many opinions are asking. Oh, hi. My name's Chrissy Shapeka. Some may call me the leader of the TikTok bimbos, but I would call me hot. Listen, Karen, a modern-day bimbo doesn't need to know what a mortgage is or how to file taxes. But we do know it's time to let go of those who are in prison for marijuana charges when the states that we're in have decriminalized marijuana, you dumb fucks. And we also know that capitalism is the root of all evil, but it's almost impossible to consume ethically in a capitalist society. So let's stop blaming each other and let's blame pieces of shit like Jeff Bezos. Fuck you, Jeff Bezos. Oh my god. Anyway, fractions are dumb and I'm a hot bimbo. And my IQ is probably a lot higher than yours, Barbara.
Feminism becomes nothing more than a label to add to your collection, no longer a risk at all because the word itself has come to focus on men. As Jenna Crispin writes in Why I Am Not a Feminist, women are still choosing to opt out of work and stay at home to raise children, and women are still taking pole dancing classes, saying it is good exercise. Women are still painfully removing all of the hair from their bodies and pretending to be morons so as not to threaten their male suitors. They are still giving their money and attention to musicians who tell them they are worthless pieces of ass. Women are still watching blockbuster films and aspiring to be the supportive wife or the sexy girlfriend who needs rescuing, rather than the one man saving the world. Women in Hollywood are still producing films where men save the world. They still love and support and marry wife-beaters, rapists, and misogynistic trolls. Women are still voting Republican. Yet you can, they insist. Still be a feminist and shave your legs, fuck men, consume misogynistic culture. Look, we're doing it. We call ourselves feminists. You can too. The political and sociological understanding of the pressures under which women attempt to live their lives is replaced with personal choice. For example, everything about our culture may be pushing women towards marriage, from romantic narratives in movies and television to health insurance policies and tax benefits granted by the government. And marriage has historically been a way to control women and reduce them to being property. The visuals of marriage ceremonies and the words of wife and husband are still heavy with this symbolic meaning. Yet, if you want to get married and you choose to get married and you identify as feminist, then your getting married is automatically a feminist act. So we have books called Sexy Feminism, scientific studies about whether feminists have a more satisfying sex or romantic life, personal essays about how feminism helped me get that promotion or have better orgasms. And while there is a vague notion that there is something called the patriarchy keeping you down, there are a few ideas of how to counteract it except through individual achievement. Now that we have removed all meaning from the word feminism, our ranks have swelled. A woman can now take up the feminist label without any true political, personal, or relational adaptations whatsoever. It's just another button on her jacket, another sticker on her bumper. Although this trend has always existed, as have women who prefer to ignore the bars of their cage than bash themselves against them, the progress with which feminism has become interchangeable with activism for anyone and anything has increased exponentially over the past decade.
Feminism is constantly evolving. Let's talk for a second. You are not a feminist until you deconstruct the horrible exclusionary origins of feminism, and you help to work towards a world where feminism is not just a system that works for white women, but a system that works for everybody.
This isn't in small part due to the forced change in language stemming from acceptance of transgender activism into the mainstream, and the forced alliance with feminism and gay rights. Woman no longer means adult human female, so ubiquitous that the word did not need to be defined or reduced for a child to understand it. Now it means anyone who identifies as a woman, as if woman were a club or coveted title and not a descriptor of half the population. Along with this redefinition, we have new words like assigned female at birth or transmisogyny exempt to try and replace female, and even those come under fire for recreating the same two divisions of male and female, despite the obvious need for language to describe those two categories. Worse still, those of us who prefer to call ourselves women instead of vagina owners, womb havers, or whatever new word is now the norm, are considered to be antiquated, uneducated, or at worst, bigoted for refusing to play ball. If this were a linguistic squabble over something like what's it called the bugs that light up at night, then it wouldn't be much of an issue. Lightning bugs are apolitical, gender is not. Hewitt continues, of course, in this inverted analysis, the most wrongs are perpetuated against the most marginalized genders, and the most marginalized of all are the men who wish to be seen as women, whose concerns have become so central that any woman's issues that exclude them are deemed hateful. The new meaning of feminism, of man, woman, male, female, sex, gender, is trans-inclusive, so therefore the only reason to not accept the new meanings is to be trans-exclusive. And being exclusionary to marginalized genders sounds like the sort of bad thing that happens in the run-down, backwards, old meaning of these words, not the shiny new, forward-thinking, renovated, artisan, gender-fluid, coffee shop in every corner meaning. Mounting a resistance has meant starting from scratch, trying to carve out semantic boundaries where the old ones were, all while being absolutely demonized, invisibly restricted into bad, right-wing, discursive neighborhoods. As this process took shape, the existing users of terms like feminist increasingly resisted this process. Some conceded new meanings of woman while trying to draw the line at female, or used new, more precise terms like gender-critical feminism to describe what it was they advocated. Others rejected such moves as needless and tautological, since being critical of gender is inherent in the meaning of feminism. Some have attempted to apply differential labels to the colonizers, such as genderists, but lacked the cultural power to make this relabeling stick in any meaningful sense. In any case, the problem was that the original words had been taken over, and now the new occupants were denying the former inhabitants any language to describe the original meanings. As time has shown, these attempts to maintain boundaries of new terms by reclaiming the old ones have faced an enormous struggle, since any language that rejects the gentrified meaning becomes anti-trans by definition. No matter what phrasing is used, all alternatives are readily portrayed as a cynical attempt to smuggle anti-trans beliefs under reasonable-looking language, to the point where terminology so basic there is nowhere left to go, such as female and biological sex, are considered dog whistles for hateful bigotry.
Thanks for the question. You asked about two different things here, so for the sake of time, I'm just going to talk about their dog whistles. I'll make a video on their trolling tactics in the future. TERFs absolutely use a lot of coded or suggestive language or dog whistles all the time. You could argue that they're not actually dog whistles, because to trans people at least, it's very obvious what they're trying to say, but they definitely try to cover up their transphobia to make it look more like feminism to the unsuspecting. It's also how they keep themselves in denial. By not using traditionally transphobic language, it kind of helps their cognitive dissonance, by making it easier to convince themselves that they're not actually a hate group. Now, the list that I'm going to give is not comprehensive, so don't take this video as definitive. But if you feel like I missed something important, please leave it in the comments. So without further ado, here are things people say to signal TERF ideology. First up is the terms they use to describe themselves. Many TERFs don't like to be called TERFs, so they'll call themselves something else. Usually radical feminist, or rad learning, or rad leaning, or something like gender atheist or gender realist, or just gender critical. Some people that identify as gender critical may not identify as radical feminist, but their beliefs still rely on TERF ideology. Second, all of the words that they use to refer to trans people. They don't want to validate trans people's identities by simply calling them trans men and trans women. So they'll use a lot of terms that bring attention back to their assigned sex at birth. There's terms like TIM and TIF, which stands for trans-identified male and trans-identified female. This refers to trans women and trans men, respectively. There's also dysphoric male and dysphoric female. These mean the same thing as TIM and TIF. There's also TRA, trans rights activist. They may also say genderist, or collectively the gender cult. Third, all of the terms that they use to refer to cis women. TERFs don't believe in the concept of cisgender, so they won't say the term cis. Instead, they'll say something like biological woman, natal woman, woman-born woman, adult human female. Fourth, certain talking points. Most of the time, what TERFs say is pretty obviously transphobic, but they do have a few lines that may seem a bit vague to those who are unfamiliar with them. There's trans women experience male socialization or have male privilege. Also, non-binary people are self-identifying out of oppression. They're specifically referring to AFAB non-binary people there. There's also feminism is for females, with trans women obviously not being female there, or any talk about female-only spaces. This can mean places like women's restrooms, dressing rooms, or shelters, or just spaces to talk about feminism. Fifth, certain imagery. TERFs definitely use the Venus symbol a lot. Now, it's very possible for a non-TERF to use the Venus symbol. It predates TERFism by a long time. But just be wary of it, especially on social media. They've also recently taken to using these emojis, specifically British TERFs, because they represent the colors of the UK suffragettes. And that concludes my list of TERF dog whistles. Again, definitely not comprehensive.
Even if you try your best to play ball, to respect pronouns or allow men to call themselves women, when your language is policed so harshly and equated with bigotry, it becomes impossible to win. Stating that you are a woman only attracted to biological females, bigoted and exclusionary. Only attracted to those of the female sex, transphobic. Referring to any of these topics in plain, easily understood language is equated with being aggressive and left behind, while the language of the day reflects its postmodernist inspiration with being needlessly confusing for the sake of sounding intelligent. And all the while, this happens under the banner of progress, while the feminist movement is dismantled and gay rights gets trampled underfoot. This, dear viewers, is where we part. I read this article, and I could not agree more. Because that's what it is. Like we've moved from, you can't say woman, you can't say female. You know, people are complaining about trans misogyny exempt and trans misogyny affected. Now they're saying we shouldn't even refer to sex at all. And the problem is, the reason why these words keep getting reinvented with new labels that essentially come back to female and male is because they're needed words. In the same way that you need a word for water or sun or ground, you would, if you said we couldn't use those words anymore, we would create synonyms. And you would still have something to define those categories because we need that to clearly communicate with other people. But clear communication has never been the goal of the trans community. It's never been the goal of replacing these words. The goal has been inclusionism. The goal has been to portray being female or male as being some sort of club, which I've always found to be so frustrating, because how do you get to the point where you think being female, being a woman, is something that you can just opt into? And how, as a woman, do you think you can just opt out of it? I can identify however I want. I can dress however I want. But I still face the same risk of sexual assault, of domestic violence that women face no matter how they look because of the fact that I am a woman. It's frustrating, and I'm so tired of circling down to it, but I think that Hewitt was a very well-spoken author in this article, and I recommend that you guys read it. I'll have it linked down in the comment section below. Additionally, please let me know what you guys think about the use of baking footage, cooking footage during these videos. I think that's probably the middle ground of thing I have to do often enough that recording's not a pain in the butt without having constant moving that causes people to look away. So I would appreciate the opinion. If you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.